You sound as though I'm guessing you have your children or you think is that correct?
Will you please state your name for the record?
To live, Clavante Williams.
And I know, Mr. Williams, I know you.
Yeah. Can you repeat the first name?
To live, Clavante Williams.
Will you spell that for the court reporter?
Yes, ma'am. TALIB as in boy.
Okay.
And I know, Mr. Williams, I know that you just arrived in Jacksonville today. Is that correct?
Correct.
And where were you coming from?
Right now, I'm in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Okay. And you drove up with your wife. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And how long have you known Mr. Barr?
10 plus years.
Okay. And you guys have remained close through those 10 years?
That's correct.
And you were, prior to, I guess, St. Petersburg, you were in the U.S. Army. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And currently you're employed with the VA.
That's correct.
How would you describe Mr. Barr?
So like everybody else said, they can go on and on about all the great things, you know, Christopher Barr and how great of a man he is. But since 9th grade year, he always, you know, made sure I stayed on the right path, regardless of the career field I wanted to do. If it wasn't football, military, police officer, firefighter, he just encouraged me to keep going and actually take stuff serious and, you know, work hard and, you know, stay out of trouble. He was like the friend, the brother that always does the right thing, you know. Excuse me.
Even to this day, now that football is over, he has stayed close to you. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And even though now you don't need the encouragement on the field or the encouragement, you know, to do some of those make the right career choices, is he still a positive influence in your life?
Absolutely. Now that we're older, he encourages me to be a better dad to my, you know, my son and my daughter. Sometimes I can be hot-headed. You know, he's always that person to, you know, to mellow down your attitude and, you know, just know like better days coming. You know, no matter if you're struggling, you know, mentally, physically, he don't want that make you smile, man.
Even though we're here today for this sentencing, going forward in life, what kind of man do you think Mr. Barr is going to continue to be?
Man, if y'all ask anybody he came across paths with, you would never hear anything bad about this guy. I think he'll be an outstanding father, person, friend, brother, husband. He does everything with. And I know this is just a mistake, and it's unfortunate.
I don't have any further questions.
Okay. Any cross? Okay. Thank you, sir. You may have a seat.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah, and the last witness would be Mr. Barr himself.
All right, Mr. Barr, is he going to testify or allocute?
He's just going to make a statement, Your Honor.
Okay. If you'll just come up to the podium then.
Please state your name, full name for the record as well.
Christopher Rashad Barr.
And Chris, you know we're here for Mr. Barr. You know we're here for sentencing today. You've heard, you know, you've read what people have said about you, but you have not had a chance to address Your Honor. So this is your chance this time.
Your Honor, I first want to start off apologizing to you, the state attorney office, the Jacksonville Sheriff Office, my family, my friends, and even the people that looked up to me while I was serving in the community. I'm here to say that I made an honest mistake, which caused the uproar in my life today. But however, the mistake I made doesn't define my character, me as a man, me as a brother, me as a son, me as a friend, and me as a role model. Like I said, I take full accountability of my actions, and I plan on learning from my actions and growing from them With that being said, I'm just asking for forgiveness so I can continue this journey I had going for myself to be successful. That's all.
Thank you.
All right, any other evidence or witnesses for the
We do not
defense?
have any other evidence or witnesses. I will just note for as Mr. Williams drove up from Tampa today, I know that Isaiah Ford, who wrote a letter, is delayed in the airport. He was coming from Washington, D.C. to be here to speak on his behalf. There were a couple other people that couldn't make it because of they had to work today, and they lived in Buffalo and some other places across the country that wanted to be here to personally show their support. And while I know that there are a lot of letters that can't be written because of protocol, there's been outstanding support from law enforcement, from Mr. Barr as individuals because of the person that they know. And while they can't address the court as a whole or as individuals, just want the court to know that he has a lot of support as well because of how he was as an officer.
All right, thank you. I will call upon the state. Do you have any witnesses or evidence you wish to present?
I do not, Your Honor, just argument.
Okay, then I'll hear argument. We'll start with the defense.
This is I call it a unique situation. It's definitely an unfortunate situation. But the charge that Mr. Barr has pled guilty to, Your Honor, for oftentimes this would be a PTI, a probationary case, and we never would have gotten to a sentencing hearing. I think we understand the unique circumstances here because of the fact that Mr. Barr was a Jacksonville Sheriff's officer. And Mr. Barr has been honest with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office about the mistake that he made right away. When they asked him about it, he was forthcoming, and he has dealt with the consequences of those actions immediately. If you look at the pre-sentence investigation, and sometimes that's all the court has to go off of, it defines a young man who should never be in a courtroom. Mr. Barr has been an outstanding young man from the time that he was born. His mother spoke. He's not the young man that gave her trouble, was ever disrespectful. He worked hard, made it through high school, was successful, not just in the classroom, but also on the football field. Went to University of South Florida where he played football. And like some of his other friends could have gone on to play in the NFL or attempted to play in the NFL, but he chose to come home and serve his community at Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. And when he made that decision, he dove headfirst into that, and for 5 years was an outstanding protector of this community. He is a great brother to his sister, a great nephew to his nieces and uncle to his nieces and nephews. Even listening to his stepfather talk, a lot of times that can be especially when you know somebody since when you meet them at 7 years old, there can be some conflicts there getting to becoming part of the family, especially from the men in the family or the boys in the family. And that just didn't happen with Mr. Barr because he doesn't have those kind of bones in his body. He's humble, he's honest, he's respectful, he cares for people, he looks out for people. Mr. Williams and some of the other young men that I said wanted to be here today, to me are the best example of what kind of person that Mr. Barr is, because Mr. Barr comes from a neighborhood that a lot of times young Black males do not make it out of. There are a lot of people that came up and friends that came up with them that are incarcerated, that are still in the streets, that did not have that drive and that push to be positive members of society. There are some of his friends that made it out who can attribute some of the fact that they've been successful because Mr. Barr pushed them. He doesn't do drugs. He doesn't drink. Mr. Barr was always about doing it the right way, doing the right thing. And that is infectious. And everyone you talk to, when you talk about Mr. Barr, say that. He is an infectious personality, not loud, boisterous, that kind of infectious, but infectious that the way that he wants to live is infectious because it's about doing it the right way. I oftentimes at these sentencings talk about how I know the defendant, how I've gotten to know them from the time of the arrest until maybe the time of sentencing. And I have a limited knowledge of, and I can only tell the court what I've seen in that time. That is not the case today. I've had the privilege of knowing Mr. Barr since he was 15 years old. And I did not, in reading through these PSIs, reading through these letters, and talking to individuals, there is not one word in here that is false or that is a exaggeration of who he is. He is just he's a good kid. And I call him a kid because I've known him since he was so young. And now he's a good young man. I have 3 kids at home who absolutely adore him. And I don't see him that often. He's always been respectful to me. He wanted to learn things about being a man that's working in society and being part of this community. He would ask me questions because he wanted to be the best person he could be. During COVID, kids were out of school and they were doing school at, online or what have you. And so my office is downtown and I hadn't seen Mr. Barr in a while. And I was coming out, we had finished the day, they had finished class, I had finished work, and I was locking the door. And as oftentimes, because I'm right downtown, police officers drive by my office. It's not too far from the jail. And I know a lot of police officers and they'll stop in and say, hey, from time to time. On this particular day, we came out, kids jumped in the car, I was locking the door and a police car pulled up. So I turned to see, who is this, so I can say hey or what have you. And the door opened, and by the time his head maybe got 2 inches out of the car, 3 car doors popped open and they simply attacked him. Now, my kids hadn't seen Mr. Barr probably in 2 or 3 years. I'd never seen him in his uniform. But that's the kind of effect he has on people. He's just a positive person and people look up to him, they respect him, and he's always nice. In talking to Mr. Barr throughout this case, I can tell you that he is extremely remorseful for what happened. He never intended anything bad to happen or for anyone to get hurt. He got no gain, personal gain at all out of this. The only thing that happened to him was he lost his dream of continuing to serve his community as an officer. So he's paying the price for his actions. He understands that. He accepts that. The pre-sentence investigation talks about probation or community control, and as part of that, the conditions being talking to youth in our community. And I think that is exactly the kind of a sentence that we would ask the court to render today, is to place Mr. Barr on probation, as this would have been a typical in this kind of situation. As part of that probation, to allow him the opportunity to continue to serve our community by helping and talking to others as he has always done. For continuing to do some of the things that's trying to prevent some of these youth from growing up and becoming and having interaction with JSO. I think him talking to them would be a positive and continue to help not just Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, but help the Jacksonville community. I think most importantly, Your Honor, his dream of being a law enforcement officer is done. It's over. But his dream of being a successful member of this society, helping this community to be better, helping young men and young women grow up and overcome some of the obstacles that he's had to overcome, that does not have to be over. But that is significantly hindered if he is adjudicated of this offense. And so as the last thing that we would ask this court is to withhold adjudication in this case so that Mr. Barr, while he serves his punishment and while he has to show us all that this was a mistake, that he still can continue and do positive things and be the best person that he can be for himself, for his family, and for this community that he's always served. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear from the state.
Your Honor, this case is somewhat unique. I agree with the defense in this respect because most of the time when officers are arrested, and thankfully that's sparingly for these types of offenses, it's typically we get kind of two kind of cases, or three kind really. One of them is someone who is using their authority to look up people or things that are related to their personal life, which they shouldn't be doing. That's probably the most common. Or at other times we have a request maybe from like a friend that says, hey, can you tell me if I got a warrant out for me or something like that. That's not what we have in this case. And this case is problematic because there were twice when this defendant provided information to people that he shouldn't have, and he looked up information that was confidential and very sensitive. The first one, you might argue, may not be as problematic. He looked up a tag for someone to make sure it's clean. We may not be here if that were the case today, but the other one is far more serious, and that involves what occurred on September 18th, spilling into the 19th of 2023. Law enforcement had pulled over an individual. I think it was related to a narcotics investigation, an individual who was suspected of engaging in drug deals. Law enforcement arrested this individual, and investigation revealed that this individual the guy that was pulled over may have like ripped off a drug dealer in that area. And the drug dealers, and I say ripped off, he'd sold them like bad dope. So that individual, a guy named, Nathaniel, pulling up his name now. I'll get back to that. He was, I guess, I don't know if he's childhood friends or they went to high school together, but he asked Mr. Barr through text messages hey, can you tell me who was arrested in the San Marco area last night? And he even described him as a Hispanic male, which was in fact the case here, because he wanted that information. And that's information. There was also a driver to that vehicle who was not arrested. So they're basically the people that ripped off somebody that he knew. So for him to provide that information, he provided their address, he provided their names, he provided information that would allow these other people to go after them. That is what is problematic. It was an ongoing investigation. He put people's safety at risk. And the way this was discovered was because a friend of his was actually somebody that was under a federal investigation at the time, and they had like ongoing, they ended up obtaining an iCloud search warrant. And in the iCloud search warrant, they found this other individual's information and his text messages, and they saw where this individual said, hey, I got somebody on JSO, and he actually named Mr. Barr. I can talk to him. He'll tell me what we need to know. And then you can see that Mr. Barr, the timing of it is that Mr. Barr, then they had a conversation. Mr. Barr looked up the JSO report, which was not subject to any public record. I mean, the prosecutor's office hadn't even had this yet. He'd just been the one individual had just been arrested. A report had just been produced. So he literally provided this information within hours, less than 24 hours after it even became uploaded on the server. So that's why the state believes that at a minimum, an adjudication of guilt should be part of the sentence. This is someone that clearly proved himself not to be trustworthy and in a position of the utmost trust. This is somebody who swore to protect and serve, and instead of doing that, he put people at great risk. The individual who he was talking to was a guy named Nathaniel Hatcher III. Mr. Hatcher, as I said, was under investigation at the time. He's subsequently been federally indicted. I will say that if we could have proven that there was any kind of money or a rationale why Mr. Barr did this, I don't know why Mr. Barr did this. I wish I could tell you, but all I have is that he knew Mr. Hatcher from, I believe they graduated high school together. But if there had been, and Mr. Hatcher, given the fact that he's under federal indictment and is facing very serious charges, he's not somebody that I think, if he did tell us why, would be overly credible. But it is highly concerning and suspicious that Mr. Hatcher could just tell one of his other criminal associates, oh, I can get an answer right away, I'll contact Paul. And sure enough, he did get the answer he needed. These people were put at risk. I can tell you, and I'm trying to handle this delicately, so I'm not asking you to sentence Mr. Barr because of an end result that happened, because I can't say Mr. Barr was the reason this happened, but I can tell you that these individuals whose names were provided, they were shot at in St. Johns County a couple months after someone had followed them from their court date and followed their car and followed them after to St. Johns County. And again, I'm not asking you to say that Mr. Barr's actions caused that, but what I am telling you is that that result is within the realm of possibility when someone does what Mr. Barr did. So I'm not saying he did that, and I'm not asking otherwise. We'd be asking for a prison sentence potentially. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that's why this is so serious, and that's why he said something effective. I didn't mean anybody to be harmed. I'd like to do that. I really don't think he did. And like I said, I think best I can tell is he did this because, or the innermost to his benefit, he did this because he happened to know Mr. Hatcher and was just trying to help him out. But Mr. Hatcher is somebody who's had brushes with the law. So, and given Mr. Barr being a police officer, I find it hard to believe he didn't know that Mr. Hatcher was up to criminal activity when he had contact. So for that reason, Your Honor, I am asking that Mr. Barr be adjudicated primarily. The probation that was recommended was very stiff. And I think it was community control level 1 followed by some kind of probation. I also think jail, when JSO would like him to serve jail, they did ask for me to say that today. From the state's perspective, I think I can see jail being appropriate in this instance, but at the same time, I don't think that the recommendation and what was asked is a walk in the park by any stretch. I do have some concerns with the defense saying that he could talk to younger kids. I don't really know what he could say as far as that. And I say that because he worked really hard to get this job and he threw this away. And while that is a cautionary tale, it basically what he would tell them, or I'd be fearful that he would say, well, I got this job, but the people I was with or my friends or whatever, that was more important than that. And I don't know that it almost in a way concerns me, because you can say, hey, you can be the police and you can have inside information and keep it out. It's different from somebody that, we have people who commit DUIs and unfortunately, cause an injury or even kill somebody, and they say, don't do what I did. I think that this is a little bit different of a scenario, because I don't really know how that would come across to use is what I'm saying. I don't know if that's the best route to take. But to reiterate, this is the reason we're here today is because of how serious this was, and to give up confidential information not only puts other people at risk, but it also, other officers trusted him. Sheriff Waters, who gave a comment, he trusted him. several people trusted him. He was not on the force for very long when this happened. He also needs to be adjudicated so he can't return to law enforcement or another. Employers need to know that this is what he is capable of. I don't, he said an honest mistake. I don't think that's really what I would call this. A mistake is when something happened by accident, and maybe the overall result's something he didn't intend, that may have been accidental, but he clearly knew he shouldn't have done this, and he didn't think twice about giving this information when he was asked of him.
So is there a recommendation from the state? I mean, he does score 4.7 points.
Right. He
So
doesn't score any time,
Right.
and he's not eligible for prison. Your Honor, I would recommend either a jail sentence of 90 days followed by probation, or the community control that was recommended by in the PSI. I think either of those would be sufficient, but I think JSO wants him to serve jail time, and understand that, given that he was an employee and the conduct that he engaged in, that also reflects really badly on Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Last thing I would say is, look, police officers, they come in and testify all the time. There's always talk about police officers trying to become more engaged in the community, and people need to trust them. And over the last couple of years, I would say police officers, for various reasons, and some of it maybe nationally, and some of it maybe deserved, they don't have the reputation I think they once did. And it's incidents like this that are why. So I think that's why Jacksonville Sheriff's Office wanted him to serve jail time.
Okay, you've got final word rebuttal.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just briefly. Your Honor, you can make a mistake. Have knowledge of what you're doing, it still can be a mistake. I think that's a narrow definition of what I think Mr. Barr is telling the court, and what his family is saying. A mistake is something that's out of character, that is not, in this case, in this situation, a mistake is something that is out of his character, that is not who he is, who he's ever been, and something that he knows was wrong and is never going to do again. He understands he made a mistake. He had no, as the state said, he had no intention of anything ill coming about that. He has answered every question that JSO has asked him. And if there was anything else that Mr. Barr had any intent or knowledge or anything of that nature, it would be, we'd have different charges. He was honest with them about what he did. He's remorseful. He is going to continue to be honest with whoever asked him about this incident, law enforcement wise, that is already known. And I do think that we can learn from this type of situation. And so that's why when you talk about speaking to the community or speaking to kids or things of that nature, it's not to tell them, hey, how I can sneak one by, or you can be slick. That's not, we're missing the point. We have an individual who has lived life, has overcome obstacles, has made mistakes and gotten in trouble. But that doesn't have to be the end for anybody. That also doesn't have to be, if we can get one kid to not make that mistake or overcome or skip that obstacle that they may have had, that is a victory for the community. He's the kind of individual that can relay that message and people can understand it. It's not fake coming from him. It's legitimate. And that's why I know that Mr. Barr is going to continue to serve his community in one way or the other. And as the PSI recommended that, because I think they saw that too, that he could be of use to the community. And I think that would in turn help JSO and help other departments in the future if he can reach some of those young kids. And so that's why we'd ask for that. That's why we mentioned that part that the probation officer mentioned. But again, Your Honor, I think an adjudication, we all understand who he worked for, what happened and all of that. But I think an adjudication in this case does not serve anybody. It does not serve anyone. And his background, his history, everything that's on paper and everything that's sitting right here says that this is the case. This is the kind of case where a withhold is appropriate. And there's no no need to believe or thought that Mr. Barr will ever come back in front of the criminal justice system.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Barr, if you'll come forward, sir. How much credit time does he have?
1 day.
Okay. Right, Mr. Barr, I've considered the testimony I've heard here today, all of the information contained in the pre-sentence investigation report, which includes all of these character letters and reference letters from friends and family and colleagues. I've considered the arguments of the attorneys, and of course, I've considered the facts contained in the arrest and booking report, what your charges are and what you've pled guilty to, and that being 2 counts of this unauthorized access. These are each 3rd-degree felonies, as I advised you. Each one is punishable up to 5 years in prison, although you do not score and are not eligible for prison because you score 4.7 points on your guidelines. Before I impose sentence, let me just say a couple things. By all accounts, I'm going to agree with the state and the defense. This is a very unique case. I've not seen a case like this before. I've never seen a PSI like this before. You have no prior record. You have not only your high school degree, but your college degree. No drug use, no alcohol use, no gang affiliation, nothing negative. It was all very positive. And especially the character letters as well. I don't doubt that you have a heart to serve our community. And that's obviously what got you into law enforcement in the first place. So that is on the positive side of my balancing. Because as a judge, that's what we do. We kind of weigh the positive and the negative to hopefully come up with what is the wisest and most fair judgment and sentence that we can impose under the facts and circumstances of each case. But one thing that is also different in this case is while I'm not punishing you for being a police officer, I can't also give you some additional benefit for being a police officer, if that makes any sense. And that is because you are in a position of extreme power and extreme authority as a member of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. And so your level of honesty, integrity, and truthfulness has to be absolutely beyond reproach. And even though you have nothing in your background to indicate or give us any idea that something like this was going to happen, you did on at least 2 occasions provide confidential, restricted information to those who were not entitled to it. Certainly, you would be rightfully fired for doing so. And so the question then becomes, now what should be the criminal consequence of doing those things? And please rest assured, I am not going to impose the sentence I'm imposing to send any message to anyone, whether to JSO or other police officers or children or youth in our community. No. I am imposing a sentence as what a judge has to do for a variety of reasons. Our sentencing scheme is to do many things. To punish, because you have to be held accountable for your actions. To rehabilitate, that's part of our general sentencing scheme. Denunciation, to say this action is wrong, right? This crime is, or this action that you've taken is unlawful. And not in this case, but in others, restitution. So those are all parts of what our Florida legislature has advised us, is that we have to take into account for sentencing. And so I hope that I have done that here today. I probably talked too much and you want to just get down to the business of your sentencing. And so I will go ahead and sentence you, but I have to tell you, I cannot withhold adjudication of guilt. I can't. Again, you were in a position of power and authority and it was abused. And I must adjudicate you guilty of that. You've pled guilty to that, and I'm going to adjudicate you guilty of that. no other reason I can give. I just think that is the appropriate thing to do in this case. So I will adjudicate you guilty on each of counts 1 and 2. And on each count, I will sentence you to concurrent terms as follows. I will sentence you to 60 days in the Duval County Jail with credit for 1 day served. That will be followed by 2 years of probation with the following special conditions. You will serve 150 hours of community service, and I'm not going to specifically order that they be to youth. They can be to wherever or whomever you want, because quite frankly, I don't know if schools or youth groups will now allow a convicted felon to speak in front of them. So I will leave it up to that. But if you wish to do it in front of youth, you can do so. And you will have to pay mandatory felony court costs of $518. And those will run concurrently. Any questions about the sentence? Do you understand that? Well, you maintain the right to appeal the sentences I've just imposed if they're illegal. But otherwise, that's going to conclude this case today. Now, I will say, I know I've made you a convicted felon, and that will certainly prohibit you from working as a police officer, or I assume firefighter or federal agent. It's not going to prevent you from getting a job, especially this being a non-violent crime. But you are going to have to get a job. And if you can't, and I'm not making this a condition of probation, but Operation New Hope has a very effective program at getting good paying jobs for convicted felons in their Ready for Work program. So you can certainly go there, but there are plenty of other jobs that you can have. But that's my decision today.
Your Honor, may we approach on a,
Yes, but before he leaves, he needs to turn around and answer some questions for the probation officer right behind him. Yes, so I'll see the state and defense at sidebar.
Mr. Barr, what address will you be going to once you're released?
6410 Lidberry Drive South, Jacksonville, Florida.
Did you say 6410?
Yes, sir.
And can you repeat the name of that street, please?